U.S. retail sales unexpectedly fell 0.3% in May as inflation sends food and gas prices to record levels, weighing on consumer spending. The fall in May is a sharp reversal from the increase in April. Joining us to discuss is Coresight Research founder and CEO Deborah Weinswig. Deborah, it's good to talk to you today. If you take out gas station sales, we're talking about a decline here of 0.7% in May, which certainly points to the fact that a lot of these higher prices are starting to eat into, the budget for consumers. And how do you look at this report today?
I think, right, the consumer is spending a lot more on essentials. And as a result, we're seeing categories, I would say even, kind of greater than we would have expected, like furniture and home furnishings, which, the growth was modest. And then if you account for, kind of what we're seeing on the inflationary front, was, in real terms was quite negative. And we're seeing more of this movement, right, towards value orientation where consumers are still spending. But I would say it's this, kind of increase on the essential side. And, I don't think that there's a near-term end in sight either.
Yeah, if you listen to what we're hearing from some of the big name retailers, it is about shifting consumer habits, to your point, going more towards the essentials, but also smaller ticket items, which is a real shift from what we saw last year. What have you been seeing in your research in terms of the shift there? And how much, what are things going to look like months down the line?
It's interesting. Since the pandemic started, we've run weekly surveys. And so, which really support kind of a lot of the changes we've seen. And, this past week, we saw the highest percentage of, it's actually the first time it's kind of crossed over 50% of buying fewer items. And so we're going to see kind of less items. 42% of people said they're seeking out discounts and promos. And then another real change, this was interesting, was cutting back elsewhere in terms of services and whatnot. So everything that you would expect to be happening I just think it's more exaggerated than many of us would have expected at this point.
Yeah, and the question is, how much worse is it going to get? We're, of course, awaiting that Fed decision this afternoon, expecting a higher rate here. That's going to eat into credit card debt, into car loans. How do you see that reflected in retail sales overall as we look ahead?
It's interesting because I think that on the payment side, right, it's been easier to kind of finance transactions, right, with a lot of these buy now, pay later kind of aggregators and whatnot. And so I do worry, and we're actually hearing retailers for the first time bringing back layaway, right? So we are already starting to see some of these changes come through on the payment side. And I think, retailers are going to be aware that you have a consumer who's stretched, who needs kind of some of those, smaller items that they can, surprise and delight. If we think about the holiday season, which of course, right, this is a time that we retailers think about that. But I think that, off of a very strong holiday 21, I will tell you, it is keeping me up awake, up at night right now, thinking about this holiday season.
Yeah, to that point, if you look at this month's or May's numbers, a lot of the declines there weighed down by a drop in vehicle sales. Supply a big issue on that front too. But what sector do you see getting hit the hardest?
We talked a little bit about, kind of home and home furnishings, but, once again, department stores, which kind of account for beauty, jewelry, accessories, apparel, also quite negative when we looked at kind of the real numbers and, what was actually posted. Their sales were down 1.5%. And, starting to see some of these, fewer trips, right, to the mall, right, because of gas prices. And then right when they're there, the intentions are stronger in terms of where they're spending. And, sales and whatnot are only driving so much. You have a consumer who's going in much more budget minded than we've seen in quite some time. And I think retailers are having to kind of also rethink a bit on the fly their marketing. But one of the biggest issues right now is they've got a lot of inventory that they ordered at times that were, for different seasons that are all in the store right now as well. So we've got kind of this, the supply chain challenge, we have the inflation challenge, and then we just have the demand issue, and it's all kind of coming to a head at once.
Yeah, and we heard that warning from Target last week saying price cuts are coming because they have to clear that inventory. Deborah, it's good to have you on today. Deborah Weinswig, Coresight Research founder and CEO.